Mine went pretty well. I don't know about y'all's, but I think it was a smooth Monday.
Mine's actually
Yeah, it's
been,
been pretty good.
yeah, mine's been very lovely. And always any day is made wonderful by the presence of Jessie's dog.
I think he thinks he's part of the show now.
He
I,
absolutely
I,
is.
I got home at like quarter till and was like, okay, look, got to take the dog out before we get started. I'm like, goodness, hurry up. We got to record a podcast. And he's just like taking his sweet time. And now here he is.
Fantastic. To anyone out there listening, thanks so much for joining us. We're really excited, Jessie and I, to be joined today by another Sweet Tea friend and company member. This is Amanda Rogus. Hey, Amanda.
Hi, everyone.
Amanda is in charge of our Little Green Tea, which is our Shakespeare for little kids. Kids who are just starting to kind of understand theater itself and what dramatic storytelling can be. And she introduces them to Shakespeare, which is awesome. And so today, during our cocktail hour, we're going to talk about Shakespeare for young people. And we're probably going to talk about other things, too, because it's a cocktail hour, and we just can never stay on theme on this show.
Yeah, we're bad. We're so distracted.
So, let's start simple. What are y'all drinking?
Amanda's is the most interesting, I think.
Yeah, it is. So I'm not much of a drinker, but I was like, I'm going on the cocktail hour. I have to get creative here. So I'm on the keto diet. So I looked up what I can do for rum and coke, and it's in this fancy schmancy glass that matches my shirt. So yeah, it's a touch of rum.
A touch of rum and
Mostly Coke Zero.
Coke Zero.
But I can bring it, so.
With a touch of rum.
Fantastic.
There you go.
The combination of the sugar, the caffeine, and the rum is going to make you a delight this evening for your family.
Oh yes, yeah, most definitely.
Does it taste good?
It tastes different than I'm used to, but it's good. I mean, I'm just not much of a drinker, so it's an interesting little drink we got going on here. I like the glass though. It's very much like wonderful Margaritaville-esque.
Yeah, it's like a pink margarita glass, and it absolutely matches what she's wearing because everything Amanda does is always color coordinated. She's just too put together.
I love it.
What are you drinking?
I'm off-brand and just continuing to be. I have ginger ale again today. I really just quickly grabbed something from the fridge. So ginger ale it is. It was in there. It was cold. And yeah, easy.
It has to be cold. I just ran down to the ginger ale because I was jealous of Jessie's. And mine had not been in the fridge. Mine had been in a cupboard. And so I put it in this giant glass with like all of the imaginable ice so that it will hopefully get very cold enough that I can enjoy it in time with the rest of you.
Fingers crossed.
So we're recording this in mid-December, just about exactly the halfway point, December 14th, which means Christmas is right around the bend, and for our friends who are Jewish, we're right in the middle of Hanukkah season. So whatever you celebrate, happy holidays. You might be listening to this in early 2021, in which case we hope you had a happy holidays.
Yeah. And happy whatever's coming up next.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, this theme for today. Jeremy had put in the notes that he was hoping we could bring a guest in. And there's a part of me that thinks that was a really subtle dig at me because I think he knew I would have nothing of use to say. I have there is maybe no one in the world less suited to teaching children than me. I love kids. I do not have the patience to instruct them in anything, let alone in theater. But I'm joined here today by two people who are radically wonderful at it. And I would love to hear from both of you about not just your experience with like teaching theater and bringing theater to young people, but also just teaching young people, just being involved in education and the pedagogy of young people. Because it's, unquestionably important. It's one of the most important things we can offer as a society. And, Shakespeare is perhaps a strange, it's a strange, like, subgenre to add to the topic of education, because it's really freaking hard to teach Shakespeare. I've been doing it a long time. I've been directing and acting in it for many years, and I'm in my mid-20s, and I still struggle with the language all the freaking time. So trying to bring it and manifest it and make it come alive for people under 18 is a real challenge, and people who do it with enthusiasm and verve are like my heroes. So, Amanda, why don't you start and just tell us a little bit about Little Green Tea and like how it got started and what it's all about?
Sure. So I've worked as an education artist at different theaters, different Shakespeare theaters across the country. And so when I started working with Sweet Tea Shakespeare, and Jeremy was like, we're looking to start this young program for younger children that kind of builds them into green tea, I was like, that's right up my alley. That's what I love. And so this is a program that's designed specifically to give people sort of the basics, but in a fun-loving, theatrical way. And so it's a mishmash of games and learning the basics and really just becoming a collaborator, right? I think creating in Shakespeare, you're not just an actor, you're not just a director, you're part of that creative process and sort of getting them all excited. And my favorite part of teaching little ones is they're so eager, right? There's that like transcendental energy of just thrill as they start to piece things together. And so that's what makes it worth it to me, is just the excitement and the joy. And that's what I'm looking forward to. So if you're interested in Little Green Tea for elementary school and early middle school students, please sign up. It's the perfect gift for the holidays, as we're talking about. It's December 15th. If you're like, what should I get the little ones? Little Green Tea subscription. Most definitely. It's a lot of fun. And to be over Zoom, I think now in this platform, and to be kind of having that challenge of how to get your kids engaged, this is a good way to get students involved and excited. It's something you can do every other week, pop in and be part of. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. I'm getting my master's right now. I'm working on my MFA in Shakespeare and Performance. Mm-hmm. And I also have a master's in educational psychology. So I'm really interested in pedagogy and the process. And so, I'd love to work with your little ones and grow with them. I feel like I learn as a teacher just because they're such giving hearts. Young kids are so excited. So I love the little ones.
So what's the age range? You said elementary and early middle school. Are you like starting like 7, 8?
Around 7. Mm-hmm. So they can come in. We're ideally looking at somebody who's engaged with some basic reading levels. So we're going to be talking about how to read through text, right? Context clues. What does it mean? And digging into that with the beginner reading level. So we're not jumping into, high level Shakespeare right off the bat. Don't be scared with that. No, it's more like, how do we engage with text? How do we engage with character, right? And so there's 2 levels. So there's the early elementary, and then there's like 4, 5, 6, which is the level 2. And they go back and forth on different Saturdays. So we see them twice a month. And it's a fun hour to engage and to storytell with folks.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What about you, Jessie? What's your educational background?
Oh, okay. So I did my my BFA at East Carolina University in theater education, and did an internship in a high school, and that was a load of fun. Cool. Doing high school introductions to Shakespeare. Yeah. It's kind of mind-blowing to just watch them actually figure out what the text means and that it can actually be fun and relatable. But then I went on to do my MA in theater history at Brooklyn College, and then later went back and taught for a year at a middle school, which was psychotic. But one of my personal favorites was always the Shakespeare unit. I think one of my absolute favorite moments, I learned this exercise when I was doing my internship from the lovely Julie Howard, who was my clinical teacher. But we basically took 2 versions of a text from Romeo and Juliet. We would have the original text. We would have the No Fear Shakespeare translation. And then they would have to then, reading those 2, put it in today's language.
Wow.
To the best of their ability. And there were some really funny things that came out of that. And also when they had to like get up there and read Shakespeare and read passages from Romeo and Juliet. I remember one occasion where a child was like, had to say the word hell. And he's like, I can't say that, Miss Wise. And I'm like, you're talking about the place, honey. It's okay. You're not cussing. It's okay right now. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's really cool. So, were both of you introduced to Shakespeare for the first time in middle school? For me, it was, in terms of the education trajectory of my life, my first introduction to Shakespeare was 7th grade, but I was reading, I read the canon back when I was like 10, when I was in 4th grade. But the first time I like studied it in a classroom setting was in 7th grade. We did A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is the perfect gateway drug. Possibly arguably the most accessible Shakespeare play, and therefore, and one of the lightest and happiest and least troubling, like morally troubling, and so therefore a very good introductory play for young innocents. But what about for you two in terms of encountering Shakespeare in the classroom? Like, when were you first introduced to it?
Yeah, for me, it was kind of a twofold introduction. So I went and saw Midsummer Night's Dream at the theater in downtown Pittsburgh when I was in 6th grade. And at that point, I was really into musical theater. That's actually kind of what got me into the drug of wanting to do straight plays, right? And that excitement when it's not necessarily a song, but like other ways of expressing that excitement, right? That epiphonesis. So there was that. But then the first time I was like in a classroom reading it out loud was my 9th grade year. I had an amazing English teacher. Her name was Miss Krappus, and she divided the classroom in half. We were reading Romeo and Juliet, and we had like little labels of like Capulets and Montagues. We were facing each other. It was so exciting.
Awesome.
And I read for Juliet, and I was like, that was it. I fell in love with it to a whole different degree. And that's actually what got me into the Shakespeare contest in Pennsylvania. And that's kind of what has led me here. So that 9th grade English class really, really changed me. So yeah, that was my kind of first educative moment, as it were. How about you, Jessie?
I was actually homeschooled, so my curriculum was a little steered in its own direction, particularly where English went. It mostly was self-led as far as literature. But what was my first? I know I picked up, like, I think my uncle gave us a complete works of William Shakespeare at one point, and probably like 8th grade, I started just with the goal to read straight through the whole thing. So, which didn't actually happen, but like Comedy of Errors was the first one I read myself, and because it just comes first in the book, and I mean, it was a good start. And from there, I think my first like educational standpoint, I went to a Christian like week-long camp, and one of the interest groups happened to be Shakespeare. And basically, a pastor led a conversation about Shakespeare, and we kind of got into Romeo and Juliet through learning what insults meant and doing the whole Shakespearean insults worksheet, which of course is a blast. And just learning that Romeo and Juliet are ruled by their hormones. And that was a really fun conversation to be having at a Christian camp. Yeah. So, and then from there, I don't know. I just have always really enjoyed Shakespeare, even when it's been mostly self-taught. And then I actually got to dig into some classes in college, doing comedies and histories. I never get into the tragedies, of course. But
I don't care that much about the tragedies, but I love the histories.
Yeah, the histories was a lot of fun because we had a teacher change at the last minute, and I don't know who the original teacher was supposed to be or how he was, but who I ended up with was like the head of the English department at the time, and he was just phenomenal. We did a lot of group work, which I don't usually love, but we really dug deep into the plays, and I really enjoyed that.
Very cool. You know, one of the things I suspect we'll keep coming back to in this conversation is the influence that teachers and educators have had on us in getting us interested in Shakespeare and making us believe that we can hack it, you know?
Yeah.
Miss Haglund, who taught me 7th and 8th grade English, was so passionate about Shakespeare, and she had been a theater artist at one point. And so she had this real affinity for the texts as works of art, and as texts that were meant to be staged and experienced live. She never let us think about the plays or treat them like just words on a page. She was always really big on making sure that we understood the theatrical possibility of them and like the excitement of that. So we always watched like movie adaptations, and we would watch scenes from the RSC and from the Globe. And she just made sure that like from the get-go with Midsummer Night's Dream, we never thought of it as like a book for a class, but rather like this is just a copy of what actors say. And then she would like give us video footage so that we could actually see actors doing it, and we would read it aloud in class. We would stand up and read it instead of reading it to ourselves, silently. And for me, I was already doing theater by that point in my life, and that really spoke to me. Like, that got me newly excited about the plays, because I had been reading them for many years at that point, but I had never really seen any of them or experienced any of them live. And to have a teacher who insisted, like, no, you have to think of them as live. When you read them on the page, you have to imagine what it would be like to actually say it and see other people responding, and like, imagine people actually getting stabbed with swords and running around in beautiful dresses. Like, that's actually part of the experience. That's part of what the plays are. And I think if I hadn't had that kind of enthusiastic, imaginative, creative teacher, like, leading me through A Midsummer Night's Dream, I don't know if I would have fallen quite as hard for the plays in middle school as I did. And that's why, I'm so glad we're talking about Shakespeare for young people, because I think that, like, the only way that Shakespeare is ever going to really reach young people is if the people who are teaching about it can find ways to activate it and make it, as Jessie said, like, fresh and accessible, relevant, funny, and I think, like, live, like, just, that there has to be a performance element, even if it's just standing up in class and reading it out loud.
No, absolutely. My two biggest mentors, Dr. Ty Buckman and Dr. Paul Menzer, are really into that sort of engagement. And I think as I've progressed in my college career, getting to engage in that realm and to understand the idiosyncrasies of the rhetoric, but the background and the textual culture and all of this stuff is one thing, but being able to get it on its feet and engage with it as an artist as well as a scholar, I think, is the key to unpacking what Shakespeare is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think it's a key to reaching your students in general, particularly if you're teaching students who, like mine, were in a classroom where they were sitting down at a desk for the rest of the 6 hours of the school day. Mm-hmm. It's so important to, like, incorporate things like movement and conversation and, actually putting it up on its feet to really get them engaged, because you do your best learning when you're engaged in the material, and part of that is making it active. Mm-hmm. One of the things I love about theater in particular for young people and for adults is it's so interdisciplinary. So you have all these opportunities to reach back to things they've already learned maybe or are going to learn, and reinforce that in the classroom, and just make things click, make those connections.
Yeah, we did Macbeth my 8th grade year, again with Miss Haglund, which was great. We watched a couple different movie adaptations, which were terrifying for a 14-year-old version of myself, because everyone was just killing each other, and I was like, wow, this is so bloody. And then we did Romeo and Juliet my 9th grade year, which I think is fairly standard in the U.S. I think a lot of high schools start with R&J freshman year.
Yeah.
But I was really lucky. I got to do Shakespeare 3 of my 4 years of high school. We did R&J freshman year. We did Othello my sophomore year, which was extraordinary and, like, really I went to a really like wonderfully radically progressive all women's school. Well, actually, at the time it was all women. Now it's all women and non-binary students in downtown Portland. And the woman, Mrs. Salvi, who retired this year actually, who taught Othello, was just adamant, like from the first day, that we were going to be talking about how the racial politics of that play sort of could directly correlate to like the racial inequalities and inequities and injustices of the United States at that time, like at the present moment. And it was that was a really powerful experience. Like Othello still scares me and I don't think I should ever direct it, but like I do, I have a real appreciation for the fact that this teacher of a bunch of 15 and 16-year-olds was like, nope, we're going to have the hard conversations even as we delve into this really hard play. The play is tough enough on its own, but she was like, we're gonna find a way to not only delve deep into the text and the characters, but we're also going to like tug them into our current moment and have bigger conversations about today as well. And then my senior year, we did Hamlet, which was wild. Fortunately,
it's Hamlet.
I had a teacher who loved it, which was great. When you have a teacher who's passionate about the thing, it really doesn't matter if you're not, because you just end up having fun. If they're super engaged, you almost are engaged by default. At least that's how I am as a student. That's why I love small classes where you can just get to know the professor, because once they start nerding out about something, it's so fun to feel like you're getting like sucked into their vortex. And I'm glad we waited till Hamlet to study it until my senior year, because I'd read it a bunch and I'd seen productions of it, but there was still a part of me that was like, I don't get this. So it was good. It was good to hold off with all of that like existential like weird Danish history great chain of being nonsense until I was like 18 and ready for it. But what about you guys? Like these were the plays we did in high school. They weren't necessarily the plays I liked the most, but they were the ones we studied. But how has like the way that you were taught Shakespeare or the Shakespeares you were taught in school, how has that impacted like the plays you love today? Or like the plays that how you feel about plays today?
My top 3 favorite Shakespeare plays, and they bounce back and forth, so they're like a tie for my favorite Shakespeare play, are Hamlet, Much Ado, and Measure for Measure. And they all came from experiences within the educational realm that I got to act in them, right? I feel like as an actor, getting to work on Hamlet as a female, to me, was amazing, right? I went in thinking, oh, I'm going to audition for Gertrude. That's what I normally would play, right? And then to get the honor, and I would call it an honor, to get to play that role was surprising and thrilling. And I think getting the opportunity and having somebody see something in me that I didn't even see in myself, really, I think that's what teaching is, right? When they see beyond and they can see things for you and help you get to those levels. And Much Ado About Nothing, I've had multiple chances to work on that show. One of my favorite opportunities was playing Dogberry, and we toured it around different places in New York, and we did it at a nursing home, and we also did it in front of like a middle school classroom. And there was something so thrilling to see the different reactions, right? The kids, when Dogberry's like, I'm an ass, they were like, oh, she said ass, right? And then like just seeing like the nursing home folks smile, right? To be on this tour that was educating and giving back to the community was huge. And so I think
also like you were born to play Dogberry. So like there's that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely a fun time. And we actually, from there, we did an educational workshop with the students where we did this like verse thing about how you scan text, right? And so we had all of them in swivel chairs, and they would like swivel back and forth with the stresses. And it was awesome. Like I could think of no better way to teach scansion than with swivel chairs. So there you go. It was definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think largely probably I have the Monday brain. I'm just going to say that right now. Definitely I've been influenced by productions I've seen. Yeah. I think has made the biggest impact on whether I've seen a good version or what I deem a good version, either filmed or in person, have been the ones I've tended to gravitate towards the most, which I think comes back into it's not just a text. This is a living thing. It's supposed to incorporate all these dramatic elements, light, sound, characters. Because without it, it's missing stuff. Like, this is not the way Shakespeare intended it. Shakespeare intended it to be alive. It wasn't a sonnet. It was supposed to be performed. So, which arguably I think a sonnet's supposed to be performed too. But yeah. So Much Ado is always a great favorite. I love Merry Wives because I think that's the first live production I saw of a Shakespeare play during college. So that one is near and dear to my heart. Plus, I got to work on Falstaff's Fat Suit, which was just a blast to stitch pieces together. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I realized how much I loved the Henriade because of productions I saw at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. That for me are landmark productions that, like, I think for the rest of my life, every time I ever touch those plays, I am only ever going to be trying to move to just even, like, I don't know, have some little piece of the brilliance that lit up their versions of those plays. It was like, it really was like a religious experience. Like, I was like, I'm converted. Like, these are the best plays in the canon, and, like, maybe the best plays ever. And so right for America today, so political, so prescient and funny and moving, and just yeah. I mean, I will never direct them that well. Like, the rest of my life is just going to be trying to mimic some little bit of that, like, the clarity of that storytelling. And then there are other times where I've been like, wow, I really like this play on the page when I imagine what it would be like staged, but I don't see a production that confirms that, and so I'm like, is it actually a good play and I've never seen a good version, or is it, like, not as dramatically compelling as I thought it would be? That is what
Maybe it just means you need to direct
myself. Yeah, that's definitely what.
Yes, that's definitely.
I think that's what that means.
But I mean, that's how I feel about restoration theater. There's so much restoration theater that I'm like, this is good play. The fact that people are doing it badly is not my fault. I'll do it better. But I did feel that way about Love's Labor's Lost for the longest time. I was like, I love this. I love these characters. Like, I love all of the really, like, subtle, graceful emotionality of sort of the final act of the play, the final moments. I see character arcs. I see really beautiful interplay of language and exploration about, like, the head versus the heart, and, like, wit versus love, and competition versus community. And I was just like, yes, all of it. And then I saw so many terrible productions, like, live and on film. And I was like, am I crazy? Like, is it just bad, or am I, like, is the play bad and I'm just, you know, a lunatic, or have I just not encountered a play that has, like, a production of it that has, like, lifted it the way that I am envisioning? And it wasn't until I saw Amanda Dennert's production at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in 2018, which was, like, a full 15 years after I read the play for the first time, that I was like, oh, here it is. Here, yes, I was right. This play can be phenomenal, and it can absolutely, like, you know, buoy your spirits, and then crush you at the end, like, emotionally devastate you. And yes, you can believe in the love stories, and yet, yes, there can be, like, a genuine exploration of romance, and it can be musical and whimsical, but also, you know, heartbreaking and poignant. And like, watching that production, there was this, I remember at intermission just having this sense of, like, calm and, like, peace, because I was like, it is confirmed, like, like, what I was seeing on the page, like, can actually be that beautiful in person. And that is another way that I think it can be really hard for young people, I think, to really latch on to Shakespeare if the productions that they're exposed to aren't really mining the text for like modern resonance and kind of new truths. And like, you know, these plays can be staged in a way that is only nostalgic, right? And only replicative of a very white, hierarchical, oppressive past. Like, you can absolutely stage his plays that way. And I feel like nothing shuts off a potential Shakespeare lover at the age of 15 more than seeing a play that so obviously is intended to be like highbrow, or like intended to be, you know, you know, like, oh, like, you know, deeply intelligent or you know, overly historical. Doesn't mean you can't set plays in past historical time periods, but you better find ways to make that other time and other place feel immediate and real and exciting and meaningful for a contemporary audience. And so that's, I think, another challenge for teachers, right? Is it's like, not just how do we get this play off the page, right? How do we activate it? But how do we activate it and make it feel important to them? How do we make the play feel essential and meaningful to them? And I think that's why R&J is such a go-to for freshman year of high school, because you're the same age as the lovers. It's that immediate accessibility of like, well, they're our age, and however ridiculous they are, like
you're just as ridiculous.
They share, we're just as ridiculous. Like they share a lot of our problems. My parents don't understand me. There's, you know, it's a dangerous world that we live in. I want to do what I want. I want to love who I want. I want freedom, you know? So yeah, like to me, it's not just activating the plays, it's activating it and making it relevant somehow for young people and making them understand that they are actually represented in the characters, which means they need to see actors that look and sound like themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's right in the like cusp of the personal building Zerman of a freshman, right? To be like, I've got to break out of what my family wants and become my own person, right? And discover who I am, right? I think that's exactly why Romeo and Juliet hits home. And I also think like out of the tragedies, it's the one that you're like, oh my goodness, like you can have a class discussion about suicide awareness, right? And like safety. I remember when I was covering it in one of my lectures to a class, I was talking about how like these are people your age, right? And they're so passionate, they're so in love with each other, but look at all of the things we could have done to prevent this, right? You can also make it a discussion on awareness. So I feel like there's so many avenues you can take with these different plays. But yeah, I definitely think it's like, this is my age, I can get this, right? I get this. I have a parent like this, or thinking of like Polonius too, with like helicopter parents, right? I think that's another reason why Hamlet's taught in high schools is like, do you relate to this character? Do you relate to Ophelia or Laertes, So yeah, no, I definitely agree.
And also Shakespeare was so good at light and dark, right? And all of his comedies have tragic elements, and all of his tragedies have comic elements, and his histories have everything. And like, I think, part of an educator's job, at least the teachers that I've had who have taught Shakespeare and succeeded at really making me excited about it, have lent into the fact that every play of Shakespeare's has elements of all different kinds of genres. There's history, there's romance, there's sadness, there's darkness, but there's also light and humor and mirth and inside jokes and family and, making sure that you lift up all of the different elements of the plays, right? And that you don't ever let a classroom of people be like, because this is a tragedy, everything is sad, and we must be serious while we talk about it. Like, no, Hamlet's making jokes into a grave. He makes jokes in a grave. Like, that is part of the character. R&J is pretty much a comedy until halfway through Act 3. And so
until it's not.
And that's another way that I think they can feel really relevant, right? Because what teenager or even younger, right? Like, what middle schooler doesn't feel like they have a life that has a lot of light and a lot of dark?
Mhm.
There's no young person that isn't dealing with some shit, but who also like loves to have fun with friends.
Right. It's like their
They're
own
a roller
roller
coaster.
coaster.
Yeah, I was like, they're a roller coaster right now. Yeah, and we all are really, and especially this year. I feel like, um, yeah, and that's a good teacher too, who can help you navigate those ups and downs, and then connect that back to, this is just life.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to go through those ups and downs, so hold on.
Buckle your friends.
Hold on.
There's my pep talk for today. Buckle your seatbelts. Check your
It's gonna be a bumpy
car.
flight here.
I mean, I remember because I think we read an act a week of Othello. I think that was how we did it in my sophomore year, and I'll never forget the conversation we had after we read Act 5, like coming to class that day, and everyone just being like, we all read that, didn't we? Like that really happened. And she came in and she was like, all right, let's talk. Let's just talk. And I don't like, we definitely opened up the books and we looked at some passages, but like, we weren't doing literary analysis. We were just kind of like talking about how emotionally raw we all felt by the ending. Because that play is new.
That's a dark play.
Yeah, it's a really hard play. And yet, like 2 weeks before, like when we were doing like Act 3, like there had been so much laughter about the idiot soldiers, and like Iago just absolutely like running Rodrigo in circles. The unfortunately like the black sheep friend that you can just kind of, Iago's just leading him by the nose everywhere he wants him to go. And there's something sort of fun and delicious about that. And then 2 weeks later, we were all sitting there like close to tears. And it takes a teacher who is willing to have the hard conversations and the happy conversations, and address the light and the dark, the highs and the lows. And I think as you said, Jessie, to like make young people understand like the reason these plays have endured, or one of the reasons they've endured, is because they seem to reflect what it is like to live a human life, which is very complicated and has lots of different shades and moments of pure joy and moments of real grief and heartbreak. And you can't really, in our world, you can't live a life without experiencing the extremes of it. Even though some people have much more privilege than others. And Shakespeare knew that. He was like hyper aware of that. And so when you see a really good production, you're like, oh, that's just like me, or that's just like my world. And it's because the plays, I think, just managed to feel so comprehensive, so holistic.
Yeah, I always am fascinated when you open like a complete works and it divides them by category, right? It's like, is this really a comedy?
Yeah.
Is this a tragedy? Like, and then you got the tragicomedies and the romances, and it's a history because it's a king, but is it? I mean, I just think it's fascinating to make it so black and white, right? When it really is this gray territory of it's everything, right? I think like Much Ado is a comedy, right? But the whole hero,
it's rather tragic.
Becomes very tragic.
Yeah.
Just like Romeo and Juliet is hilarious until it becomes serious. I mean, it's just like, I just think it's wonderful to be able to engage with both. Or like, Claire and I were talking about Merchant of Venice this weekend, right? There's wonderful moments of tragedy, and there's wonderful moments that are hilarious, and they're back to back, and they switch beautifully. I mean, that's the gorgeousness of Shakespeare, and I think any good teacher finds their way to show both of them, and to not favor one over the other, but just be like, this is what this is, because life is like this, right? Life is that roller coaster. So yeah.
Yeah, B and I read, B is Amanda, she read for Nerissa and I read for Portia in a reading of The Merchant of Venice on Saturday, and I had never done any of that text out loud. I had never worked on it. I've seen the play many times, live and in video, but I had never done any of the text myself. Never done any monologues, never worked on it, because that play scares the crap out of me. That play is so intimidating to me. It's like that and the Tempest and Othello, where I'm like, someone else needs to do. Like, there are some plays in Shakespeare's canon I just don't like, that I'm just like not interested in, like Antony and Cleopatra. But then there are like those plays that I'm like, no, I really like this. I just don't know what to do with it. And Merchant of Venice is one of those plays. And the thing that astonished me, Amanda, reading it aloud, was recognizing that like 3 minutes after Nerissa and Portia are just mocking all of the suitors to Kingdom Come and just being completely savage and funny and having their like, you know, girl cocktail hour with frozen margaritas at the beginning of the play. You have the whole like Shylock subplot begin where his daughter runs away with all his money and then he's like beaten or at least verbally abused in the street by the people who did it. And like it's just like I was like, how have we veered so fast? How are we here now? We were just there. We were just boozing it up with the girls, you know, mocking idiot men. And now we're here in the street with really scary, young, rich, white, glitterati Venetian men who are just like abusing their privilege in every conceivable way and being racist, horrid monsters. But there are protagonists. And so it's a very, like, it was, hearing it aloud really made me go, like, it made me newly appreciate teachers who try to teach Merchant of Venice. You have my undying respect. Because I met a professor earlier this year. I was a guest speaker in an English class at Fayetteville State that was reading Merchant of Venice. And I was like, how do you teach this? Like, so teachers of all of, like, middle school, high school, college, like, grad school who teach Shakespeare, those of you who do Merchant of Venice, like, undying respect for you. Because that has got to be such a hard text to teach to young people.
Right. Absolutely. And I think teachers this year especially, like, I realize this isn't maybe necessarily Shakespeare related, but I feel like with a couple minutes left, I should mention it, that this has been a hard year for teachers. Mm-hmm. And so just all of the work that people have done this year, whether it's virtual, in-person, mask, whatever you've been doing, like, you're inspiring your students in a ton of different ways on top of the challenge of teaching Merchant of Venice. Now let's do it online, right? I mean, it's its own challenge. So, like, because this is kind of about teachers, I just feel like we should say, like, thank you to all of you who have been teaching our young people and keep sending them to Sweet Tea and to places so that they can continue to grow and thrive, because I don't know, it's a hard time for everyone, but to be able to inspire little ones amidst a pandemic, like, you're a hero.
Truly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm just curious of, like, before we leave everyone, like, what is the Shakespeare play that, like, either really scares you or confuses you, or that you wish you could, like, take a class on, like a whole class on one play? What is the play that you, because for me it's Merchant. It's totally Merchant. I never studied it with a teacher, and I wish I had.
I took a class in undergrad about journeys, and we ended with the Tempest, and I wish I could continue that discussion, because I feel like we were just gracing the waters, Tempest metaphor, just gracing the waters when we began reading the play and discussing it, and I feel like had I been able to talk about that for another couple of months, maybe I'd be able to wrap my head around it, because the Tempest is just such a tricky play for so many reasons. And I'll echo Merchant of Venice, but I think the Tempest, I think I would love to deep dive a class into the Tempest and really unpack it, because I feel like you just grace the surface when it's part of a unit. So I'd probably say the Tempest.
Cool.
That would be a fun one. When I was doing my master's, we looked at the Tempest in my theater history class, and then we actually, I can't remember which theater it is, but one of the theaters in town was doing, literally, they had like 3 different groups doing productions of the Tempest that year. And so we saw 2 out of the 3 productions. One was done, I think, by a more local company. And then the other one was done by I think, Korean company. So it was like, the costumes were awesome. And I think it was done in Korean, but it was beautiful. It was really cool. But yeah, I think mine, would be Richard II. Um, because when I was in one of my classes for my MA, it was I think it may have been my criticism class. So we watched like a production of Fiona Shaw's
Which
Richard
is
II,
so good.
which is brilliant.
So
I had to
freaking
go like to the library and sit in a dark room with my writing partner, and we wrote this whole paper analyzing it. So good. But like we didn't get to dissect it in class,
Okay.
like to the level that I would have liked to. Like I read it, but like I read it and I watched it, and that was like as much context as I got. We didn't get to deep dive with the teacher, and I would have loved to do that because I feel like there was so much that I didn't get on or get in like the larger context.
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be my do-over there, or my in-depth.
Richard II is spectacular.
It's such a good play.
It's such a good play. And Shaw's take on the character
She's
was
amazing.
indelible. Yeah, she's so good. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, shout out to Angeline Morris, one of my friends who's doing a PhD in Renaissance Studies down at the Hudson Strode program at University of Alabama. She wrote her master's diss in English on Richard II and like the divine right of kings and how Shakespeare is like playing with it in the Henriade. And I mean, she told me, she's like, I spent 2 years writing a thesis on this, and I have only scratched the surface of like this play and this part of the history cycle, you know?
Right.
So I think that's such a good one, Jessie, because there's just like, when you're dealing with something that actually happened, there's like, there's so much to talk about, because you have the play, you have the play itself, but then you also have like what
actually
really
historical
happened. Yeah, the actual historical
context.
We should do some sort of reading where we should like read Merchant with a bunch of Sweet Tea people, and then we should like read Tempest with a bunch of Sweet Tea people, and then read Richard II, and just like have a big dramaturgical discussion afterwards, and just hear. I love hearing from actors after they read a play.
Yeah, it might be fun to take it like scene by scene and unpack each scene and just make that a podcast.
Podcast to come.
Podcast to come. All right, so I think we were really responsible in Jeremy's absence. We mostly talked about ginger ale and plays that we like, and then we launched a new podcast series. So, see, we can stay on.
We're productive. Yeah.
Jeremy, very productive.
Jessie and I would like to thank you, Amanda, for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
It was so great to have you here. Jessie, always good to see you, my love. Happy ginger ale day.
You as well. Yep. Enjoy that glass of ginger ale. Hopefully yours is cold now.
It finally is as I get down to the dregs. To anyone who joined us, thank you so much for being here and tuning in. You'll see us again next week. Hopefully again with Guinness, Jessie's dog, because he is the star of the show.
He thinks so.
The crab of the podcast.
He's our sponsor.
Yes.
And yeah, Jessie, I'll see you next week. Amanda, we'll see you soon.
All right, thanks.
See you later.
Bye,
Take
friends.
care.
Bye.